It's all over for you, Dracula. You might kill one of us, or even two, but you'll never kill us all. I'm Eddie Webb,
Dude, I'm Chris Spivey.
and today we're going to talk about issue 13 of Tomb of Dracula, To Kill a Vampire. Hello and welcome back to Speechless, where we are talking about the 1970s comic, The Tomb of Dracula, which is amazing and terrible and amazing.
Okay, what is the actual title of this issue? Is it Kill a Vampire? Is it Death of a Vampire? Is it Beware of Mr. Stabby Pointy Knife?
Yeah, it's because we are in the age of lots of text on the comic book cover, which is, in fact, the quote is actually directly from the cover in this issue. They have a title on the cover, which is Death of a Vampire, but the title on the inside is To Kill a Vampire. And that happens a lot because, especially if you also count, sometimes at the end of the issues, they'll give you a title for the next issue, and that'll sometimes also be different. So it's possible sometimes for issues to have 3 different titles depending on which part you get the title from. As I understand it, the standard default in these cases is that whatever title is on the title page, hence the name, is the actual title of the comic or the issue,
So
I should
now
say.
2 questions.
Yes.
Which title do you prefer? First one.
To spoil the very ending of this comic and potentially the next comic, I do prefer To Kill a Vampire because Death of a Vampire is misleading. Spoilers: the comic called Tomb of Dracula doesn't involve killing Dracula off suddenly.
I like Death of a Vampire, but I would say that what they I'm not going to spoil anything, but it doesn't say To Kill Dracula or Death of Dracula. It says a vampire. That could be any
True.
vampire. That could
True.
be Joe or Jane vampire just like flittering around the street in bat form, and Blade stabs him with a wooden knife. Dead.
See, hilariously, if they had flipped these, right? If the title page actually had Death of a Vampire on it, it would actually track better because we're right after Edith Harker's been killed
Yes.
when she turned into a vampire. So that would actually somewhat work better because the cover. I'm getting into the comic a little bit, but the cover is a bunch of vampire hunters around Dracula. So To Kill a Vampire would make sense for the cover, and Death of a Vampire makes sense for the first page. We're going to
My
deeply
second question
analyze.
for you, with your deep comic knowledge, that it exceeds mine in the weeds. Who decided that the title page title should be the one that covers the entire comic?
That's I don't know. Uh, but based on my limited research on this, it really does depend on the team. Um, I know by the time we get to the 90s, generally, most comics are fully scripted at that point. And so usually the writer decides the title, and that's the title the comic usually goes with. Um, uh, at this stage, because it's Marvel method, sometimes the letterer decides the title. Because the letterer goes, I have exactly this much space, so I have to find words that fill exactly that space.
I think the writer should have absolute power for no bias reason at all. But I understand trying to fit it within confines of a space. Having published books before and having moved entire pieces of art to make sure the words fit properly, it's a thing.
Right, exactly. And since the artists, I mean, they usually draw with a certain amount of space at the top to kind of fill that as well as, captions and whatnot. It's usually the letterer's job to try to figure all that stuff out. And so sometimes it's like, okay, well, you want Death of Vampire, but Death and Vampire won't all fit in there. So I could put To Kill a really small, Vampire is a big word, and that will actually fit in the space better. Sometimes that is actually how it happens.
Since you mentioned the team, and I did interrupt you because I was really curious about the quadruple titles this issue has.
Actually, before going to the team, I did want to take a digression. I know, which is rare for me. Um, Speaking of the spoiler of killing your main character off, who's in the title of the comic, did I ever tell you my story about how I got yelled at on Twitter for spoiling Sherlock Holmes?
Uh, I don't think so, and that is so many layers of ways to, like, burn someone. But go ahead, please. I'm not gonna.
This was after the 2nd season of Sherlock had 2nd season or 1st season? One of the seasons. I think it was maybe the 1st season. It's the season where, Sherlock falls off the building at the end of the episode.
And this is your
That's the
preferred Sherlock, right? Benny C?
No, this is my least preferred Sherlock, but at the time, I didn't know that. At the time, I still thought Elementary was gonna be terrible. Um, so I think it has to be the 1st season because I cared. In the 1st season, he's facing Moriarty. Sherlock falls off the building, and that's the cliffhanger for the season. And so the next season started, and so I was online talking about how it parallels, you know, the the final problem, the original canonical story, and then how they resolved it in the next story, where Sherlock Holmes comes back. And someone on Twitter got furious at me for spoiling both that story, which is 125 years old, I want to point out, and also the potential 2nd season. I couldn't possibly know what the 2nd season was gonna start as, and so why
Right.
do I try to spoil that? And I'm like, "The show is called Sherlock."
But that's when Enola shows up in the next season and takes over, and it's still Sherlock.
That would have been a much better show, frankly, but
The
because
thing
the worst part
I
is
think
that
you're right.
they actually literally got out of it by saying, "We're never gonna tell you." And it's like, "Oh, I hate you. I hate you so much." Not in a good way.
No, I think you're right. It was originally the end of the 2nd season, I think. It was either the
Yeah.
end of 2nd or 3rd season because 1st season didn't have Moriarty, because I
Oh,
think they
that's right, okay.
introduced the Irina Adler character for them during their 2nd season as their 1st episode opener.
Right. Point is, um, uh, uh, there's a certain amount of media awareness that I think goes to, and it's relevant to this comic actually, is that, if you know anything about how these kind of media are structured, you're not surprised. This goes let's let's bring the other constant reference to the show Doctor Who in. When, Mary Waterhouse claimed that, kids were traumatized, they thought the Doctor was gonna be killed, at the end of a particular episode, and it's like, again, the show's called Doctor Who. The Doctor's gonna be fine. The debate is not if he survives, the debate is how does he get out of it? That is always the point of the cliffhanger, right?
Well, technically the Doctor's been killed at least 12 or 13 times, Eddie.
N Well,
It's
yes,
the
that
very
there is also
premise of the
that.
show. It's
There is also that, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, he does not stop being a character.
or technically, if we want to talk about the Peter Capaldi episode, where he breaks through this massive wall of ice with his bare fist over the course of millennia, there's no telling how many times he got killed.
Right,
If you
it's just
watch the episode, you know the impetus of why that happens.
he keeps generating the exact same right. I kinda wanna watch Peter Capaldi again, that's weird. Anyway, um,
I like Peter
so
Capaldi, but for some reason, I still don't want to watch his Doctor Who's. I don't know.
yeah, eh, yeah, but,
No, we're here to talk about Doctor Who now. You've walked us down this
yeah, I've
primrose
opened the
path.
box, it's too late now.
Remember that time when the Doctor fought Dracula?
So, you say that, but there was actually a novel where he did. There's also
It was a fourth
he
Doctor
did
one,
too.
right?
Well, okay, there's, Do Doctor Who and Vampires is a separate thread,
Well, yeah, because
but
the vampires are an ancient race that Time Lords have been fighting for millennia. That's
right,
why they trapped
exactly.
them in E-space.
Right,
So,
exactly.
yes, even if we're not a Doctor Who podcast, we're a Doctor Who podcast. But you're saying, I'm
Right.
sorry.
No, I was saying is that, there is, an audio, which I figure is a 4th Doctor audio, where they specifically find Vlad Tepes. But I think there's a 5th Doctor audio, I think it's called Goth Opera, where I believe the 5th
Mm,
Doctor actually straight up meets Dracula.
I think you're right. I think I remember reading that.
So
Because his Nissa as a companion.
right,
And
yes, and she becomes a vampire, briefly.
yeah, because on the cover they have Nissa with fangs.
Right, right, right. Why do I know this stuff? This is what I do with my life.
Well, that's why we can do podcasts like this where we talk about the Tomb of Dracula and this snazzy cover.
Right, but I mean, that actually is point is, like, we have Dracula coming out of, his coffin with the 4 vampire hunters that we've well, 4 of the 5 vampire hunters that we know, the 4 ones that are actually active as vampire hunters, all with stakes around him, and so it looks like they're about to kill him. If you are aware of how media is structured, it's literally under a title says Tomb of Dracula. They're probably not going to kill Dracula. He may appear to be dead. They may kill someone who they think is Dracula. Um, whatever, but the implied and so that's where the tension comes in. Is you go, they won't kill Dracula. He's the star of the comic, right? And so you kind of pick up to see what actually happens.
I can't argue with that because it's true. As much as I want to like find a way to argue with it and be that guy, it's true. They can't kill the main character, otherwise you in the comic.
Right, right,
Although
right.
they could pull a New Mutants. You
How so?
remember what happened to New Mutants?
I mean, I
So
remember large chunks of humans, but
the New Mut we should just really do New Mutants speechless run. Where they bring in Cable, who is not originally supposed to be the son of Cyclops and Jean. There you go. Spoilers in case you don't know X Men. But anyway, from the future, and they're wrapping up the New Mutants for a lot of different background reasons that happen in
mhm,
shenanigans, and they didn't want to completely end the comic with the team, so instead they ended New Mutants on issue 100 to have issue one of like X Force come out with nearly the exact same team.
right, right.
So they could end Tomb of Dracula and turn it to like Vampire Hunter's Tomb, and they keep the
True,
same cast of Vampire Hunters.
true, right. I mean, and that's the thing is that also we're at issue 13, so the comic is young enough that maybe it wasn't doing so well, maybe they're canceling it. Maybe this is the last issue, right? We know in hindsight that's not the case, because I am only halfway through my volume 1, so obviously there's more after this. But I could see why at the time that could be a genuine question. Maybe this is the last issue. We don't know.
And for a horror comic, it would kind of be great to end it on issue 13.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a
true.
certain symmetry to that. How do you like this cover, honestly?
It's just not bad. It's not one of my favorites, but I mean, it's got a nice Dutch angle to it. Uh, I mean, there's I have questions about how everyone's actually fitting around the casket per se, and what exactly um, Van Helsing she's going to do with that crossbow pointed directly up over Dracula. But as it's just a pure, this is just about energy and emotion cover. It works great.
I'm really jazzing with it simply because it has everyone. All right, they didn't include Drake, but they included all the important characters.
Right.
Included all of them in it. The colors are somewhat striking. Dracula with a red cape and a blue suit is a distinctive choice. I don't think
Yes.
those are the colors I'd seen Dracula have before, but uh, I get used to it.
Well,
And
I
I
mean,
also like the,
I was just gonna say we're also in the era where blue is sometimes code for black in coloring.
that will like totally change the entire concept of the Smurfs, right, Eddie? If they were all black with like
Well,
little white hats.
hilariously, the Smurfs were originally a black and white comic, so
I did not know that.
yes,
I
and
was
French
just
for that
making
matter.
it a joke, but
Originally,
so
originally was a French comic too, but that matters.
were the Snorks also a black and white comic?
No, the Snorks were a very clear attempt to cash in on the Smurfs.
Oh, and if you want us to cover the Smurfs and the Snorks, please drop a comment in the Discord, and we
So I
still
can
probably won't do it because I don't want
I'll
to
just
watch it.
argue Chris out of it because I'm not gonna cover the Snorks.
But no, I like to cover because it's imposing. It actually has the vampire hunters as a threat, and I
Right.
don't think we've seen a lot of that from the covers or issues that we've read. And
No,
there's even a
that is
bit of fear in Dracula's face.
yeah, I mean, that is a fair point. Like, this is one of the few covers where the hunters have upper hand, um, and you're right, Dracula's a threat. And again, we're also 13 is an interesting spot because the comics also gone long enough that they can start to play with expectations on the covers. I mean, the first few issues has got to be it's time by Dracula to show Dracula being cool. Now, 13 issues in, we can maybe play with that a bit.
And in case anyone's curious, I am really loving my 70s blade slash shaft that they've introduced in the comic.
So here's my question: do you prefer the all green outfit he has on the cover, or do you prefer the brown and green outfit he has on page 1?
I kind of like the all green outfit, but then the D&D ish player in me makes me think then that means that Blade is a ranger, so he can blend in to the woods when he's out there.
Well, that's because his favorite predator or his favorite hunting thing is vampires.
Yes, that's the entire way I was going. Yes. Oh god. And the reason I made him a ranger is because Blade in this version is a highly skilled person. And the old school ranger is just usually really highly skilled. Not rogue skilled, because you still need to be able to fight.
Didn't AD&D Rangers have druid spells?
I want to say in if they had a high enough wisdom in second-ish edition, I think they had some, and
Yeah, I think
probably in
second
third edition.
edition. Yeah, because I'm actually side note. I'm playing the Icewind Dale video game, which is based on AD&D second. So I'm just learning all the weird bullshit exceptions that AD&D second had.
But they need to have a high enough wisdom to be able to cast, and I think around 6th level they start getting a first level spell.
Yeah, no, it takes forever. I completely agree with that.
Because
Also found out
I'm
that
playing the Baldur's Gate. I'm in Baldur's Gates 2 right now. Is
uh,
what I'm doing in my spare time instead of writing. And that's about where I am because I have Minsk in my party for the moment, who I can't wait to drop like a ton of bricks as soon as I can get never mind. I'm not gonna talk about Baldur's Gate 2. We should do a podcast that's about Baldur's Gate.
right. All I'll say is just remember in AD&D two, raised dead doesn't work on elves. Found that out the hard way yesterday. Anyway,
But it has to.
nope. You have to use
Maybe.
a resurrection spell, which costs 600 gold instead of raised dead, which only costs 200.
I'm trying to remember, and that's right. Jahira's a half elf, and I had
Yep.
Viconia raise her, but she's a half elf, not a full elf.
Yep. You guys have a full elf. Apparently, it doesn't raised dead doesn't work on him.
So
Anyhow,
in case you're curious, justice for Viconia and Baldur's Gate 3 is all I'm saying. All right.
page
Is there anything
one.
else?
This is why I come to this podcast. So let's talk about anything except for the thing we're here to talk about.
The thing we're talking about is a backdrop for a fuller conversation. I think our listeners know this now after 3 years. Has it been 3 years?
Great. So,
Remember, remember
uh,
when you thought we're only do this for like 3 weeks and it would be done?
yeah, it'll be done. Yeah, now here we are, too many years later. Um, this issue was released July 17th, 1973, so before D&D existed. Um, writer is Marv Wolfman, the penciler is Gene Colan, inker is Tom Palmer, the colorist is also Tom Palmer, lettered by John Costanza, and edited by Roy Thomas. So much of the same team we had last time, although I think Tom Palmer is now doing coloring and inking. And this is again full page splash page, as most of the title pages tend to be, but it's fantastic because it's right after the end of the last issue, and it just starts off. Edith Harker is dead, and they have Quincy holding his daughter in his arms because he had to kill her last issue. We have Blade ready to stab somebody for some reason. Um, we have Rachel, uh, being comforted by Taj, and Drake just shaking his fist at the window because he's trying to feel like he's important to the proceedings somehow.
If you look in the window pane,
There's
there's
a little
a
bat.
tiny little bat flying away.
Yeah, I did notice that, but at first glance, it just looks like a man at the window.
And so right now, though, they have covered the title because it says Death of a Vampire, and Edith was a vampire, and she's dead. So bam, look at that.
Right,
It
right,
is not a lie. But
right,
to
exactly.
kill a vampire.
Yeah, so now to kill a vampire, it's like okay, but the killing of vampires already happened. That's why I said if you switch titles, that actually works better. Weirdly, um, uh, and so it's funny because like last issue we ended with Quincy struggling with having to kill his daughter, and then in this one it says Dracula murdered her. But then Quincy thrust the stake in ending her existence. But it front ends with no, Dracula is the person who killed her. So interesting, kind of how the comic has already kind of reframes that.
Yeah. Well, that's for last issue was a good cliffhanger to end on. But now, if
Hmm.
you actually want to move forward with the story, you need to take it from their perspective, and that would be true. Is that she was dead the moment Dracula turned her?
Right. And so page two is is actually really cool because like this is kind of the conversation we didn't have room for in the previous issue. I think it's fine. I think it's a good structure. Is you had that last page of like, no, I just got to kill her. She's attacking us. Boom, and now it's the okay. Quincy lamenting, Blade being very pragmatic about it, and it's like just, we don't have time for this. We've got to go take care of Dracula. And Drake is like, hey, don't you have any feelings? And what's not? And then Blade says the quiet part out loud, which I love, which is you're a descendant of Dracula, buddy. How do we know you're not actually playing both sides?
That is a great point that no one else has made so far.
Yeah, everyone just took Drake because Drake's been very open about being descended from Dracula, and everyone else is like, okay, cool. Well, then you'll totally hang out with a bunch of vampire hunters. There's no conflict of interest here. And Blade's like, wait a minute. But I like because that's 3 panels, and we start to move into the next page a little bit, but it very quickly shows the dynamic because like um Blade is coming across as a hard ass, but very quickly then we're given some context for that. So Blade doesn't come across as heartless. Again, he comes across as pragmatic. And so Wolfman very deftly makes sure that we're not left thinking Blade is an antagonist to the
Yeah.
party. Um, he is a hero. He is just a very, again, pragmatic hero. And you have to understand this is 73. We don't really have the Punisher as a protagonist yet. Um, Wolverine, I think, is just starting to become a character at all at this. So the idea of the um, antagonistic anti-hero it's in Marvel's DNA. There's certain lots of characters who have flip sides in Marvel, but a character who's unabashedly a hero who still doesn't agree with the other heroes is very much a Marvel staple. But the idea of a hero who kills and that is his primary motivation, even though it is vampires, is still relatively new to Marvel.
And the other thing is, you also need to think about we didn't have a lot of black heroes in Marvel Comics at all at this point in
Mm.
time. I want to say Black Panther was there from the Fantastic Four. Luke Cage, I don't even know if Luke was around yet. He was close to this time. I want to say it was
Black
later.
Goliath. Chris is just looking at me.
I'm trying to remember Black Goliath. I don't think Bill Foster's kicking it here yet either.
I think Bill
Maybe nope,
Foster
you're
is.
right. I think Foster's 72 is what it
Yeah,
is.
I think he's like right now in the Avengers right now at this point.
So anyway, a handful.
Yes, and and again, to Marvel's credit, we've been very open about the fact that these are 70s comics. They're written from a problematic perspective. They're written by white people. There's a lot of problems with that, but from those perspectives, we're looking at relatively nuanced, complex characters, which itself is
Is
also a huge step forward as opposed to being just cardboard stereotypes.
yeah, because you even have so he comes into the group, and when he's just from the almost the first time he came to the group, they said something. He says, "Call me Mr. Blade," and he's repeatedly called him Mr. Blade.
Mhm.
He may be saying it mockingly if you're reading it how I read it, but he is
Right.
acknowledging the request to let him know that that's what you told me to do. I'm doing it. I'm going to give you shit when I do it. And you have that level of respect for another character. And but from
Right.
Blade's perspective, he's joining a group of people that are well established with their own sort of banter and rhythm. So they're willing to make exceptions for each other, hence the lack of questioning Drake.
Yeah, and to move on to the next page, this bears out because Blade doesn't trust Drake. That's mildly established in previous issues. It's become now again. You said the quiet part out loud. It's now textual here. But then Rachel steps in and says, "This is time for fighting," and then Blade apologizes. Blade is the better man and says, "Okay, listen, I'm sorry, Drake. I didn't mean to get you riled up. Let's just have you this funeral, and then we'll get back to hunting Dracula." So the way I read that is he respects Rachel, not necessarily Drake.
And that could be because Rachel is an established hunter who
Right.
has
And
skills unlike Drake.
Right. I figure it's probably a very small community, and it's like he knows the Van Helsing name. He probably knows Rachel to a certain degree, whether it's by reputation or his direct working relationship with her. But it does take her to step in before he goes, okay, listen, I'm sorry. Which again shows a complex person. It's not just angry black man, which would have been so easy to have slipped into in 1973.
Mhm.
Um, and then Quincy steps up, like, there's not going to be a funeral. She's going to be cremated. That's the process, and we need to get going. So everyone's like, no, we need to mourn. And Quincy's like, we don't have time. So again, even Quincy, he has a moment to grieve, and then he just pushes it down. And it's fascinating. One of the things I love about older comics at times is that we have an entire complex relationships between four characters over a tense situation, really good dialogue and really good character building in 2.5 pages.
Okay, I have a question for you, Eddie,
Mhm.
as a person that has designed and thought a lot about vampires. Taking a step back from the Marvel comic itself, but vampires in general. Where's your belief stance on if you're turned into a vampire? Are you still the person that you were, just with a new hunger, or are you something completely different?
That's interesting because I mean, obviously, most of the games I've worked on obviously assume some form of the former, right? Vampire the Masquerade, Vampire the Requiem, Curseborn. They're all some form of you are the same person, just now dead and a very strict diet. Um, but for me, like a lot of the, for lack of a better term, traditional vampires, basically vampires before, let's arbitrarily say the 80s. When where vampires are seen as viable protagonists, your Hammer horror vampires, let's say, really are portrayed as if they're completely different. Um, I remember one of the Hammer horror films. I think it was Brides of Dracula. I don't remember, but a woman gets turned to a vampire and she comes back and she's explicitly saying, "It's like I don't feel the same. I feel cold inside. I am someone else now. I am just a thrall." And so I really think that's how vampires were perceived: is that the person died, but their body's been reanimated by some other force that has vestiges of them. But this comic is playing with that line because in last issue, Edith was trying to stop herself, right? So clearly something remembered her. But is that that's because she wasn't quite dead yet, and it wasn't until she completely died before she lost control, or if it's the hunger just consumed her, that's left up in the air. And I think it's to the comic's benefit that that's being a little vague.
Yeah. I was just curious about what your opinion was, given all the work that
Yeah.
you've done on the topic.
Yes. I'm not a fan of Rift's vampires that are just become mindless zombies.
Agreed. But then again, that's a whole conversation about MDC.
Right. Right. Mega damage. Um, so we cut to the next victim, Cecily Parker, who yet another woman wandering streets of London at night alone. She gets harassed by someone, definitely a creep, um, maybe homeless, maybe just a muster. Not it's a bit unclear. Um, but he tries to sexually assault the woman. Dracula puts a hand on his shoulder, beats the snot out of him, just backhands him, and probably kills him. At least knocks him out.
I am stunned by the fact that Dracula likes to tell everyone that he's Dracula when he meets them. Every single, I am Dracula. You will not do this because Dracula will stop you. And you frequently get Dracula in scary letters coming out. It's like, you're kidding me, right, dude?
Yes, you're absolutely right, though. He's like, the phrase is, the conversation is, not while Dracula's come to save you. The guy says Dracula, and he says, correct, adult Dracula. So it's like, let's make it super clear. Yeah, I'm absolutely Dracula.
Oh, and
and
it's
I,
all. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say then it's always the person, the guy or whoever is getting beat down by Dracula that's overwhelmed, and then the women that he's frequently saving suddenly seem to instantly fall under Dracula's sway.
Right.
There isn't that
Um,
level of fear from them at all, which makes me wonder, does he like generate fear for his victims and turn it off to put on the allure for his intended victim?
maybe. Um, I do like, first of all, I mean, I've said this before, but I just love the fact that Dracula's so full of himself that he can't possibly not have people know who he is. I just will love this probably for the rest of this comics run. It's one of the things I love about this comic. But I like the framing of this because the um, hero going into a dark alley to rescue someone from being assaulted is such a classic superhero trope.
Yeah.
And this is structured very much like that. It's like, "Oh, thank you so much. Sure, I'll take you, just come into my arms and I'll protect you." And then all we see is them walking in the shadows and a scream. And it's like, "Yeah, he just killed that woman." And there was no reason for him to pretend to save her except for he's just a petty bitch. He just loves to fuck with people.
We've established, Eddie, that when you've been alive for as long as Dracula has, even with like his being in Topor or whatever it is for 500 years,
Right.
you need to do things to keep yourself entertained nightly, keep yourself going. And part of that is being a show vamp for Dracula.
Yeah. Now, something interesting happens when we go to the next page. Is she's on the ground. Um, Her hair color has changed to blonde for some reason. But he's on the ground. Dracula's over top of her, uh, and he says, "Worry not, dear Cecily. You'll awaken soon, still alive, still human, and you'll have forgotten all that's happened this night." Um, so, and it implies that he'll call her later as his slave. And he's done this before, where he's every time he's fed from someone that turned into a vampire, they become enslaved to him instead. We saw that way back with his last slave that he blew up on a boat that he totally and intentionally murdered. I will maintain, regardless
He
of
did
your
not
stance on
murder
this.
that guy. The boat killed that dude. If he
Guns
had
don't
jumped
kill
off the
people.
boat, if he jumped off the boat like everyone else, he potentially would have been alive until Blade stabbed him.
Right, right. Um, but I don't know because we're talking about this being the Marvel method. I don't know how much of this was Colin drew it as I've killed this girl, and Wolfman or maybe editorial going, "Oh, that's a bit too far," because, like, her going in the shadows and dying is fine, but then we seeing the body, that might be a bit too much, so let's rewrite that to make it seem like make it clear to the reader she's not dead.
Haven't we seen bodies before? Trying to remember because it's been a while now. And people are curious. We did not record these back to back. Hence my trying to remember.
Right, right.
No, you're right. The one on the boat, I think, gets killed by the bomb. Huh?
Yeah, I mean,
No,
there's no time where he, kills a woman, but I don't think we see the body. Um, I don't know. It could also have always been planned this way. I mean, it can read either way, but certainly in early Marvel comics, there were sometimes disconnects with Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and so sometimes the dialogue would be overcompensating for the obvious what's going on in the picture. Um, Similarly, there's an infamous uh, X-Men scene which caused Claremont's and his artist at the time to
is
separate
is this
John
Colossus in
Byrne.
the tree?
Yes, yes. Where John Byrne has Colossus ripping a tree apart like it's nothing, and the dialogue is, "I damn near kill myself trying to rip this tree apart." And John Byrne was like, "No, he's Colossus, dude. He's awesome. Why are you being like this?" Um, uh, but anyway, Um, so Dracula, because of course it's Dracula, we can't just do a line that. No, he has like 3 panels of like, "You're my slave, but your life's gonna be unchanged. You're gonna laugh. You're gonna love. You're gonna still be there, and then you'll be another one of Dracula's minions." Blah 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 blah. Let's have some laughter outside the dialogue box because that's important. And he's just like, "She's unconscious, dude. She can't hear you."
This is important, seeding the plot
Totally, totally.
of this issue, and also adding in that Dracula is a show vamp.
Right. Right.
This is actually one of my favorite beats for the issues that we've read, inferring that Dracula does have a larger plan than just week to week. I'll eat you, I'll kill you, I'll blow up a boat, I'll torment Blade a little bit.
No, I agree with that. I agree that, regardless of the intentions behind it, you're right. It does show him being okay. I clearly need to start getting my shit together because these hunters are actually bothering me. So maybe I start putting a plan in place. Um, and his plan involves going to the sports arena, which hilariously is called Sports Arena.
Are you
And it's
saying that these comic writers and artists in the 70s didn't understand that it's probably not called Sports Arena? I don't know. Maybe in the UK in 72 or whatever it was, they took the image from to draw for 73. There was literally Sports Arena. Maybe.
I also just love the sports arena. Looks like it's actually a bank. Again, this is pure Americans doing like, I mean, we previously had, like we have a tower of or sorry, we have the Big Ben, in the shadows because, like, we have to reaffirm that it's London as much as possible, and the only way to establish that is if you occasionally show Big Ben. So it's just I get that this is what it's doing, and I kinda have a secret love for London via American comics because it's just so ridiculous. But we cut to the morgue, um, and, we find out about Dr. Sun, and then we get to the less fun part of the comic.
Oh,
So
this is so painful.
there's a subplot happening where very obviously Asian men, very likely probably Chinese, in hats and suits, are trying to steal a corpse for someone named Dr. Sun. And then turns out that the person that they are acquiring is the mugger guy, because they say, "Oh yes, he has 2 bite marks. It's definitely the guy we want." And so the coroner's like, "You keep us quiet. We'll pay him off." It's like, "You keep us quiet." Absolutely, we'll keep it quiet. And then they, of course, murder him. Then take the money back, except for a few pounds. But they take most of the money back. Um, and his subordinates are called Chen and Lin. So again, very heavily implied that they're all Chinese. So this leads into the yellow peril trope, which
Hmm.
is a problem. Um, uh, it doesn't help that uh, simultaneous to this, there was also another comic which involved literally Fu Manchu, or not Fu Manchu. Uh, I forgot the name, the villain's name. But anyway, very
Is this the
similar.
Shang-Chi comic?
Yeah, Shanji, yeah, but his father was a notoriously yellow peril character. Um, so Marvel was again trying to be more inclusive, and at least in the Fist of Kung Fu comic, having a Chinese man as the protagonist was itself radical, but he spoke in broken English and didn't understand American ways and walked barefoot, and so all of the it's less nuanced of a character at the start. He gets better, um, but we have this kind of unfortunate subplot. I will say, I don't know if we get to it in our run. The Doctor Sun thing goes in a very different direction. It is not the direction it seems like it's a very obvious direction it's going in. It does not go in that actual direction. It goes in a
I
very
hope
different
it
direction.
turns out he becomes an ally and helps him fight Dracula. That is my headcanon
N-
right now. I don't know if it's true until I read it.
He does fight Dracula. Um, I won't spoil it. We'll see if we get there. If for some reason
I'm
we get to
not
the end of this and you want to know, I'll tell you what happens. It's bonkers.
I'm not going to assume it's for beneficial or humanity's safety that he fights Dracula. I think there's some of the nefarious plot, but if you're a
Yes,
vampire hunter, you take allies wherever you can get them, and then you worry about repercussions later.
right. All I will say is his surname is not because he is Chinese. The Sun part is a little more literal.
Hmm.
Put it that
All right.
way. um, but in the context of this comic, there is no way to know that. And frankly, it's very possible that that changed in the course of writing. So it is certainly plausible that at this time it was meant to be a very kind of yellow peril kind of villain at the behest of this. And it sucks, but It is what it is
So
a rough
recently,
experience.
I've been watching a lot of different superhero comics, superhero animated shows with my daughter, like Justice
Mhm.
League, the Avengers, whatever it was. And one of the undercurring themes always happens is that the villains always double cross each other. And it's been so easy to teach her different morals about not to trust bad people because at the end of the day, they're just going to stab you in the back. And much like
Right.
in the comic here, he was going to help the bad guys to the best of our knowledge. And they turn around and stab him in the back by killing.
Yes. Yes.
A
Or
little
shoot him
lesson
in the
that
face,
comics
whichever
are
way it
always
is.
teaching morals right there for you.
Yeah, I mean, as nuanced of a comics as this is for the '70s, it's still ultimately a Marvel comic, and so there's still gonna be a certain, let's call it hard-coded level of black and white morality in these comics because they're still stemming from superhero comics. So yeah, you're and it's but again, also that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 panels for this entire subplot, so they also do have to kind of communicate this very quickly. So it does a good job of using the tropes and structures to communicate that quickly, even if one of those tropes and structures are an unfortunately racist trope.
Sure. And because part of it is I was on Blue Sky recently and someone was skeeting, I think it's called skeeting there, that when did Superman become woke? And I was trying to talk to them. Have you ever read the original Superman? Like the OG Superman, like the first comics? Who was Superman fighting? La, la. Comics have always been that way. They've been pushing most of the better ones continue to push a more liberal agenda. But read
Next,
comics.
Chris, you were telling me that Captain America punches fascists and won't engage in meaningful dialogue with the alt-right.
I may have made some recent post about certain Captain America pages from comics that sort of reinforce who Captain America really fights for. But we're not here to talk about Cap, although we
No, we're
could
here to
because
talk about.
Blade does join the Avengers.
He does, he does. No, but we're here to what because Dracula goes to a boxing match. Um, straight up, the sports arena is because there's a boxing match going on, and he's fascinated by the violence that they move. Um, and the no lives are at stake, nothing's gained by it. It's just meaningless. And so Dracula is revolted because the violence serves no purpose. And again, I love it because if you if you track him, and actually now that I read it, think about it, it makes me think maybe the earlier scene was intentional. The more I think about it, because he could have killed that woman and didn't because it didn't serve his purposes. He generally only really is violent when it serves his purposes. Now, what he determines is meaningful is completely up to him because he's Dracula. So obviously, anyone who disagrees with him will get murdered. So that also reinforces his viewpoints. So it's a clearly self-serving viewpoint, but it's still interesting that he's like, I dislike people being violent for no reason, only if it's for good reasons, and good reasons include shit I want.
So essentially, you're just saying that Dracula is a selfish child.
He is, but I love the fact that he's completely deluded himself into thinking he's a man with morals and complex morality when it's just not true. But that's it. He goes to a boxing match and is mad at boxing, um, uh, uh, and he leaves. He's like, so the whole plan was, I'm gonna go watch a boxing match. Man, I really don't like boxing. I'm out. That's okay. Um, but I love it because again, you say you really love it when we see Dracula as the mastermind putting the pieces in place, which I appreciate. I love the Dracula that is very clearly putting the shit together on the fly. He's like, I have a plan. I'm gonna go to boxing. Oh, actually, this is bullshit, and then just fucking leaves.
I bet you in issue 18 that we're not going to read, those two boxers are actually under Dracula's sway and they come and aid him at some later point in time. So there's a reason for
maybe,
Dracula being there.
maybe I hope so. I genuinely hope so. But even not, one of the things that I like about Marv Wolfman as a writer, he, I feel like he really nails this in his Teen Titans run. Um, but he's really good at finding space for characters to do things that absolutely do not serve the plot, but are completely necessary to understand the characters are following it. Um, uh, Robin's romance with Starfire in the Titans is actually a pretty good example because it goes for a long time, and there's actually like 30 or 40 issues before it becomes plot relevant that they're dating. It's just they're two teenagers trying to figure stuff out, and particularly it's a boy who has been told to keep everything bottled up and inside of him being confronted by a sexually aggressive woman. And there's no real plot reason for a lot of time, but it is you have to understand how, frankly, how Robin's life under Batman has messed him up. And so even though he's the leader of Teen Titans, he's not a completely sane person because no one works what Batman is. And so Wolfman takes the time to do that, and then over time that eventually becomes a plot point. But it's again a couple dozen issues before it becomes relevant. So I like when he does that.
All right. So you referenced Robin as a boy and Starfire as a woman. I want to make sure people understand they're essentially the same age of characters when they're there.
Right? Yeah. No, they're both consenting teenagers for like yeah they're like
Yeah.
16, 17.
So I want to like drop that
Fair.
and
That was
reinforce in
fair.
case someone hasn't read Teen Titans and they hear that like, ooh,
No, no, no. That is fair. No, no. I said boy just because I'm so used to the Boy Wonder moniker, but no, Robin is damn near a man. In fact, he
this,
becomes Nightwing
this
during
will
that
become.
run, which is his adult. Yeah, so
Yep, he becomes Nightwing with that pimp fly collar on his first
so good,
costume. I love it. It
so
like
good.
that long V cut. So if you haven't read the Teen Titans, you should go read it because that long V cut goes all the way down to his navel. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's a lie. You won't know unless you go read it and see.
Well, yeah, again, he has to match his girlfriend's outfit, so anyway, so the cremation happens. We're back to the manor, stately Queen Manor, um, and Quincy's like, okay, we don't have time to wait. Blade's right. We need to go kill Dracula because we killed Dracula, then we have time to mourn. And then Blade points out it won't be over for me, and then suddenly we get Blade's backstory. Just
Yes.
no prelude, no. It's like, it won't be over for me. Why? It's because he killed my mother. What? And then bam, he explains his whole story. I love it. It's just like you expect to see Blade's backstory. Well, guess what? You're getting it. I'm like, yes, I love it. And basically, his mother was pregnant with him when she was she was having trouble complications with birth. They sent for a doctor, but it turns out the doctor was a vampire, and so he fed from her and killed her. But he was born right afterwards. Now, at this point, if I remember correctly, at this point, it was purely just he wanted revenge because his mother got killed by a vampire, and so literally from birth, he's hated vampires. Later on, it gets added in that because of the vampire blood in his mother's blood before he was born, he becomes half vampire, if I'm remembering
Which
that correctly.
I love because I don't think that's true here, as you're saying.
No.
I love Blade having like becoming the Daywalker, like the Dampier. That is a great touch that enhances the character.
Right. It is to me, that is the best form of retcon, which is it does not invalidate what you read previously, it simply adds to it and then gives more context later. Um, uh, but as I know, I also really love the fact that he is chased off by the midwives. The midwives break into the room and they chase the vampire off. So these women are like, "No, you get the hell out of here!" And he jumps through a
Wait,
window
wait, wait,
because
wait,
all
wait, wait,
vampires are
wait, wait,
extra.
wait. You're calling them midwives. I think they're all of the same profession, Eddie.
Oh, are they? I'm sorry. I thought they were the midwives. My apologies. Again, his mother's friends. My apologies. My mistake. But
So
yes, all of her friends come in and chase him off.
I don't know if you said it on recorded air or not, but what is the decided nationality of Blade?
Oh, right. No, I did talk about it earlier. That Blade is, as far as Marvel's concerned, right now, the comics, he is a British black man. So all of his friends are all his mother and all of her friends are presumed to be British. It's again vague here, but there's nothing to invalidate that read.
Which is pretty cool
Yeah, which I love.
because they could have
Um,
gone a more stereotypical route and had
Yeah.
him be from New Orleans, which is
Right.
a lot of additional conversation that we could have just based on that.
Right. Um, and then just and he gets it to they say that when they slapped me when I was born, I never cried. I never cried once as a baby. It's just like, okay, now you're just making shit up.
No, his
I'm so
daddy,
hard. I've never cried in my life.
he's a bad mother. Hush your mouth. I'm just talking about Blade. Yes, as well he should not have.
And then, but I there's a small moment here that I really really love. It's where Wolfman just walks right up to the line of the comics code, where he says, we were talking. I never cried. He's like, I'm just saving it until after I find that stinking mother killer. And it's like, I swear, every time I read that, I mentally insert a different word there for killer every single time. Oh wait, no, he says killer, and it's valid. It is a valid read. The guy killed his mother. That is exactly what he could have said, but that's not what he actually said.
Okay. So, Daywalker, what powers do you think a Daywalker should have? I know what Marvel gave him in the Blade movies. I know what happens in the comics. What power set do you think that would actually have?
I've always felt that daywalkers should be much more reduced vampire, like vampire but half, right? That's a very reductive way of looking at it, but like they're not able to mesmerize you, but they can kind of maybe talk you into things. They're not preternaturally strong, but maybe they can throw a wooden knife and bury it in someone's chest. And that's what he's actually kind of like how again the retcon of Blade is because we talked before. Right now, he just seems to be a human at peak physical condition, but it can really easily read as like he's got just a smidge of superpower.
Because I want to say in the comics right now, he's around probably what? I think benching 10 tons and an array of other superpowers.
Right, because he has embraced his vampire nature or something. I don't. To be fair, I'm not up on modern Blade in the comics, except for when he occasionally cameos in other comics. Um, but so now we understand why Blade was initially kind of like we don't have time to mourn her is because he's been doing that since he was born, literally. And again, it even though we saw the complexity here, we now have Marvel been telling what he showed us earlier, which I think is fine because this gives us a nice surprise in the middle of the comic, and it reinforces Blade is a hero. He is just a hero who's had a very rough past, and that shapes what kind of hero he is. And I really dig that. Um, but he's still mad. He lashes out at Quincy. Um, he's like, shove your words because when you think this is over, when you think your fight's done, I'm just starting mine because I will not rest until every single vampire is dead. And I like that. Um, so we go back to vampire in bat or Dracula in bat form, and he's flying around to find a tent of people kind of out in the wild, in the wilderness. Um, and he sees it's a valley. There's a kind of a hilltop to the side, and there's a crowd of people there around the tent, um, and they all kind of seem to ignore him. But you see one guy staring off at the bat who's dressed like a London police officer, and he seems to know something's up. But that's kind of all we get for that chunk. It's like yeah, I just flew over a tent and one guy sees him, and that's kind of it. So Woman's now seeding a lot of threads.
Yeah. I'm I'm still curious about Dracula in sunlight because that doesn't really seem to be a big issue in bat form.
Um, so I think the problem is the coloring because if you go to the next page, it says the dark begins to fade beneath the early morning dawn, and then he has to then go into a building and go to rest. So I think it's supposed to be night. It's just
All right.
a lot of people are hanging out in a tent in the middle of the night. That's
Yes.
the problem. And this is frankly a problem. This is a problem a lot of vampire fiction has. Is like unless you are in a very urban area which has a nightlife, um, it's hard to do stuff because everything happens during the day. We're generally we are not nocturnal people, and so when you have a vampire as a protagonist and everything has to happen at night, you kind of just fudge stuff. It's like, sure, yeah, they're doing this. Um, but yeah, so he goes to sleep, but the whole time he's just bitching. It's like, humanity's changed. They haven't changed at all. They're still arrogant. They're still mindless. Uh, but I will use them to plant the seeds of vampirism, which will flourish. Lots of farming metaphors, and he talks shit about Blade. Um, but I have to go sleep now. It's nap time for Dracula because I'm tired. Uh, and then they find out that apparently only a few kilometers away we have the vampire hunters driving up in a car, and I think Quincy has a car phone, which in
Yeah,
'73 would
yeah.
have been amazing.
It's advanced tech, but it's not overwhelming advanced tech, which is a nice constant touch for this.
Right. And we find out that the police officer who saw the bat, it turns out Scotland Yard has been tasked to look for bats and report them.
Are you saying
It's a throwaway line, but
are you saying that's not what Scotland Yard would do?
it's just a did Scotland Yard get a fix on that bat that was spotted? So it's like not only is it the every police officer's like, "Hey, see a bat, let us know," but like they have planned protocols for this. Oh yeah, it's bat plan alpha. Okay, sure, no problem. God, I'm on bat duty again. I hate bat duty. Get a crick on my neck every time. Oh, it sucks.
I just
But
love the
yep.
sketch of Dracula that they show. That made the entire piece for me.
Oh yes, the
You've
next
got the
page where
head
they
of
actually have
panel.
have you seen a guy that looks like this? And it's like, yes, because he is so indistinguishable from all the other people around that you have to have a sketch in case you did you see a guy in an opera cape with weird
Oh,
looking ears?
oh
It's like,
god.
no, then it's probably not our guy. Because literally, he will never get rid of that cape. So we're fine. But no, Blade's like, make sure we got exactly this guy.
If I had a cape
It's
like that, Eddie, I would wear it everywhere I went.
but yes, the guy at the
I'd
post
even wear it
office
with
is
my
shown.
pajamas. Much how Dracula sleeps in his suit, I would change pajamas but still wear my opera cape.
It's true, you gotta be comfy when you sleep. But it turns out that actually the guy at the post office is under mesmeric control. So as soon as he sees the picture of Dracula, he snaps into that because he thinks his master has come to give him commands. Um, and we get again. I love sometimes the impressionistic color that happens because the postmaster is colored in kind of yellows and blues and purples, but with the two bite marks in his neck, it's actually ringed in a bright red so that we can see very clearly the bite marks on his neck. It's a really cool way of drawing the eye. But they spend all day tr- through town trying to find this information out. So of course it's nighttime again, and Dracula is up, and he knows that Harker and his stalwarts have found me. So he's ready to go after them again. And they have made it to the building where
Before
Dracula is sleeping in.
before you do that, Eddie, I want to
Mhm.
reinforce that he says Harker and his stalwarts have found me. He
Oh yeah,
ends his phrase by shouting his own name.
you shall all lie dead at the feet of
Dracula.
your master, Dracula, with two exclamation points.
You were talking about unconscious woman. There's no one in that castle but Dracula.
Yeah, true. That's true. When you're the only smart person in the room, that's the only way you get intelligent conversation, apparently. Um, but apparently the dawn is only minutes away, so the time frame I admit is a little confusing. So apparently, it looks like he slept through the whole day and the whole night, or he just got back, and then all the stuff with the vampires happens kind of while he was making his way back. So he got there, went to go to sleep. Turns out he can't go to sleep because they've arrived. and the dawn is still. So it's entirely unclear whether a whole day has passed or it's been minutes. Bit vague. Um, but he's like, "Come to your deaths," and of course Quincy feels him. Dracula feels Quincy. They have some kind of psychic or emotional bond. Um, and so they're like, we have to kill him now because Edith. And we get a fight scene, a pretty cool fight scene, where Blade tries to stab him, but Rachel shoots him with an arrow and pins Dracula's cape to the wall, which kind of reinforces maybe the cape was not a good tactical decision, but Dracula's not getting rid of that cape.
Well, the Incredibles told us that capes aren't good tactical decisions.
Right, exactly. Um, uh, and again, like Dracula, like has to narrate the whole fucking fight. It's like I had not suspected our dear Miss Van Helsing had yet entered the room as he's getting shot, and it's just like that is a clue, by the way. She might be here.
Because, Eddie,
Um,
that is how much more powerful he is than these mere mortals, that he gets to taunt them by telling him every part of the fight before he does it to still have it work.
yes, yes. Blade attacks him, and Dracula picks him up and chucks him out of the room. And again, the whole time, just isn't that important that Dracula lived 500 years? You shall never be defeated by the likes of you. I just love it so much. He's so
This is
chatty.
a good point I want to bring up. In a lot of different superhero comics, you have people with superhuman strength that are fighting. Like when you see Spider-Man fighting someone,
Mhm,
Spidey's generally known to be able to bench like 10 tons. And when he punches people, he's not punching them with 10 tons of force. He's pulling his punches, he's frequently restraining. That's what heroes do. You have Dracula here, who I think by comic standards is anywhere from like a ton to 2 or 3 tons. I read a
mhm.
lot of these stat bios in my youth.
Clearly,
So
yeah.
with about 2 tons of force, he's fighting with all of his strength. And that's where you're going to see Blade tossed around like he's nothing, like paper
Mhm.
mache. And the impacts of those are noticeable. Like when he throws Blade into the wall, it's slightly ahead, but like Blade is unconscious. That is someone hitting you with 2 tons of force.
Right. Yeah, because he sinks unconscious against the wall of stone. Um, but then, like, we find out that the whole town apparently has been hypnotized, and so they're all grabbing guns and weapons and coming to Dracula's aid. So, which so my I think that um, based on what you said before, that him saving the girl and then saying, "You're I fed from you, but you're hypnotized." Maybe that was part of his plan. He was doing it to everybody in the town, and he's been doing it over time. So I think that was that. I think that's the payoff we're seeing here. Um, and then like
Which resolves one of my own personal issues with a lot of vampire media where they go off and I'll kill everyone, I'll turn everyone into vampires. Then you lose what you're feeding on as vampires, and then you yourself are going to be extinct.
right. Uh, and then he grabs Rachel. Taj tries to attack, but Dracula again picks him up and chucks him through a window into the water outside the building. Oh, this is the morgue. Sorry, this is all taking place in a morgue at the top of the hill because that's where you put morgues. I don't know. Uh, and then Quincy tries to shoot him with darts, but Dracula turns to mist. Um, and then and so I should be clear, this is happening over Blade's unconscious body. So Dracula turns to mist, comes back as he tries to get closer to Quincy, so stepping over Blade, and then suddenly we hear a no, and Dracula's on the ground with one of the knives in his chest, and Blade saying, "I finally done it. I've killed Dracula." That's it. Comic's over. We have no more issues to cover. That's it.
Yep.
The end of the comic.
I don't know why there's like a next time box, but that's it. No more comics after this.
Yeah, next time the final death. I mean, but he's dead. Obviously, there's not more. Um, so no. Obviously, the next issue, which is called Dracula is Dead. So it's no, totally. He's completely dead, people. Even though he's on the cover of next issue, he's totally dead. There's a certain point in time where I think the team is like, okay, no one believes this, so we're just gonna just ramp it up because no one could possibly buy this. But anyway, what did you think, Chris?
I enjoyed it. That was probably the issue I think I've enjoyed most out of the run, simply because
Oh,
it
good.
was more full of action. It was sort of a horror pulp, and it leans into the Dracula that I like, who's planning. So
Mhm.
I'm envisioning him like having bitten and controlling people in all the different cities where he's been going through,
That makes
building
sense,
up
yeah.
like a massive human army. So when he gets ready to finally enact, he could call forth that mindless mob of people to do
Right. Yeah. I I'm with you. Like this is the point where when the first time I read it, I was like, okay, no, I finally get what this comic's trying to do, and I'm into it. Like I said, Wolfman's starting to plant seeds. He's starting to put threads in, and there's emotional continuity, even though the issues are still relatively self-contained. Things that happen within the scope of this issue more or less resolve this issue. But this is the first time an issue ends on a cliffhanger that the story progresses, right? Because the last issue was a cliffhanger, but it was resolved. Edith got killed. The cliffhanger was what's the characters do now that she's dead. It was a more emotional cliffhanger. This is the Dracula's got a knife in his chest. What's going to happen next? So now we're moving into the comics officially serialized. Now it's no longer each issue is self contained.
And I also like the fact that they've integrated Blade into their team effectively. So they're a brand new unit. They've lost a member, but they've gained a member at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like Wolfman was kind of starting to write out some of the characters he didn't create to bring in his own characters. But I'll be honest, losing Edith was no big loss, and Blade was definitely worth losing Edith.
I don't think Harker would agree with that if we were talking to him, but agreed.
I What's he gonna do? Shoot me with his darts from his wheelchair? I don't care.
I'll turn to mist and they'll go right through me. All right.
Right,
I
twice
keep
now he's
thinking
done that. It's like, have you learned? These darts don't work, man.
I keep thinking about Dracula in vampire masquerade terms, and I'm thinking to myself that he's must have like a protein of 4.
Mhm.
'Cause I haven't seen him turn to dirt, which I think is 5. Uh, must also have a lot of celerity and potence because he gets a whole bunch of actions around, like a whole bunch of actions around.
Specifically, here's what happens: is he gets like 6 actions around, and then spends 3 of them just talking.
Oh, and he has dominate and maybe a dot of presence. That's my Dracula. I'm pitching together out of the 3 or 4 issues we've read.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, yeah, I think that's about right. Um, so okay, if people wanted to talk to you about your Dracula build and Vampire the Masquerade, where would they find you online?
You could find me at Blue Sky under Darker You, or you could come into the Discord and we can talk about various other game mechanics and vampires and a bunch of other systems. And the reason
Indeed.
I'm thinking so much about system mechanics is I've been writing a lot of system mechanics the past week. So that's in my brain. What about you?
Yeah. You can find me at pugsteady.com. That's my website. That's also where you find me on Blue Sky. You can also find me in the Darker Hue Discord. Where right now, I'm sharing the initial reviews of the Watson show. I'm cautiously optimistic about it now. We'll see how it goes.
And
Um,
I mentioned a podcast I listened to. One of them is actually the writer for episode 11. So that's why I'm really interested in watching it because I like their podcast, but also because I want to see Black Watson.
yeah, yeah. There's definitely it recognizes that it's kind of like House. It recognizes it's coming from Elementary, so it understands antecedents, but apparently it's doing something different with it. So I'm curious to see where it goes. And I remember liking House at the time. So,
Right.
but next time we will not be talking about Watson. We will be talking about issue 14. Dracula is dead. We'll see you next time.